Welcome, welcome. My name is Lloyd. I'm your host. Today I'm thrilled to have as my guest researcher Mr. Lloyd Morgan. Lloyd Morgan is an electronics engineer by training with 38 years of industrial experience. He's a member of the Bioelectromagnetics Society, the European Bioelectromagnetics Association, and he's senior research fellow for the Environmental Health Trust and board member of the Central Brain Tumor Registry of the United States. Lloyd Morgan, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
It's a great pleasure to have you on. So I want to start by asking you about an event in your life that took place in your lunch hour about 20 years ago. It sounds like a funny place to start, but yeah, so if you could talk to that, please.
Well, it's a very important place to start because that's what's brought me into this world. I worked as an electronic engineer for nearly 4 decades. And in 1995, I went to lunch with a work colleague, not knowing I had a health problem. And during the lunch, I had a 45-minute grand mal brain seizure, which I don't remember. I woke up in an ambulance and ended up taking me to a hospital. I had a massive meningioma. I mean, very, very large. I was in the hospital 14 days, 8 of them in critical condition. And after the surgery, I asked my neurosurgeon, why did I get this thing? And he said, perhaps electromagnetic fields.
Yeah.
And I was stunned. I had never heard that. I got involved with electronics in high school. I was a ham radio operator. And then I became an electronic engineer. I mean, I've always been involved with electromagnetic fields. Electromagnetic radiation is the word I prefer to use these days.
Yeah.
So it fundamentally changed my life. It changed my whole direction. I retired then in 2002. I was only 60 years of age to work full time on this. And I've never been a risk taker, but I didn't have the money to retire, etc. But I thought, well, I've got to do this. And I've never regretted a second of it.
Yeah. So he said it was electromagnetic fields. And how was it? You know, what electromagnetic fields? You know, what did you figure out from this, or what did he say to you?
Well, okay, so during the recovery period, it took 4 months for me before I went back to work. But what I did was I went to every place I had worked. You move around a lot when in electronics, not that many places. And I knew how I had lived in those spaces or worked in those spaces. And I had a magnetic field meeting. And that's all I knew about health issues was the electromagnetic fields from electricity. And then I also measured my home, which I'd been living in and I still am in the same home for a long, long time. It turned out that I was sleeping in a 14 milligauss field from a clock radio immediately next to my head, maybe 4 to 6 inches away, as I slept every night for at least 30 some odd years. Wow. So you can never tell for certain what was the actual source, but in terms of just a weighted average of exposure, that was it. And at that point, I became paranoid about clock radios, and I carried a magnetic field with me. I traveled a lot. Every hotel has the fields are close to zero, almost nothing. What happens is the electrical wiring, if the wires stay close together, they cancel each other because the current is the same in both directions but opposite. So 1 ± 1 = 0. But if you wire it such that the wires are separated, which is a happenstance decision of an engineering project, then you get large fields. So unfortunately, I threw the thing out. It was a Sony thing. I wish I had not done that because I could have investigated, but I was just very paranoid about the thing being around even. So.
Of course, yes. So just to put that in perspective, 14 milligauss probably doesn't mean a lot to a number of people.
So,
This thing
yeah,
goes
I understand.
very high. For instance,
What you find is risks begin at 2 milligauss and accelerate dramatically
yes,
as the strength goes up.
yes,
So, and the initial stuff was mostly children, but also at occupational hazards for leukemia and brain cancer,
yes.
brain tumors.
Brain tumors.
Right.
Yes, yes. So this was like a bolt from the blue. This was 1995, I believe. This happened.
April 28th, we want to be exact.
Okay.
A date I remember.
Well, we've all got those kind of dates, yeah. My date is 2002. That's when it happened with me with the cell phones, and we've all got these kind of dates which become burned in our memories. And so that was like a bolt from the blue, because here you were, this electrical engineer, thought you knew everything there was to know about, or certainly you got a pretty good knowledge of, or you thought, of electromagnetic fields, but really you knew very little. Is that fair to say, of the effect?
I had no idea there was a health issue. Zero.
So that is magnetic. That was your opening into this into this subject, and you've done a lot of research on this. I mean, I was looking through the document that you sent me, your bio, and you've been involved in certainly a lot of studies, and been involved, extensively with different scientific panels over the years. And so I want to start by asking you about cell phone radiation, because this is perhaps, if people have got a question about EMFs, this is the question, are cell phones dangerous? Is cell phone radiation dangerous? And more importantly, does cell phone radiation cause cancer? So could you address that question?
Well, the short answer is yes. Cell phone radiation causes cancer. It causes multiple types of cancer and ever more new results as well. So that's the bad news. The good news, and I call it distance is your friend, if you keep the cell phone away from you, the fields decrease very rapidly with distance. Mm-hmm. So if you're this far away, that's about 100 times further than placing it against your ear.
Yes.
100 squared, fields decreases the square of the distance, is 10,000. Mm-hmm. But that's also true when you're not using the phones, when they're always transmitting to the cell towers. So you want to keep it away from your body at all times. Mm-hmm. Okay? Oh. Don't put it on your body. And one of the things that's very disturbing is that women will keep cell phones in their bra. Multiple primary breast cancers.
Yes.
Multiple.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about solutions in a little while, but in terms of the science, so you say yes, cell phone radiation causes cancer. Everybody's not in agreement with you on this, clearly, because 99% of people who own cell phones, and that's like the majority of people, it seems, in the Western world anyway, walking around using them happily, putting them next to their brains. So what is it that you know that everybody else doesn't?
Well, first off, the science is there. It's absolutely there. There are two types of people that say there's not a problem. People that are highly ignorant and they can't believe it's true, and industry people. And I use a metaphor I call the dam of denial. So industry builds a dam, and behind the dam, metaphorically, is water or truth. Well, asbestos, tobacco, lead, dioxin, all of those dams of denial have broken, collapsed. The telecom industry's dam of denial is cracked and leaking, meaning more and more people are aware that there's a problem. Or there may be a problem. Maybe. Now, a friend of mine and also an activist is Ellen Marks.
Yes.
Her husband got a brain cancer, and she told her sister-in-law, that she thought it was due to cell phones. And her sister said, "Ellie, that's ridiculous."
Yes.
2 years later, she came back, "Ellie, you're right." Because what happens is, that's your first reaction. This can't be true.
Yes.
But then she hears it from somebody else that she respected.
Yes.
And I've seen that over and over again. So it's like, I will not argue with somebody when they say there's no problem. There's no point to it.
No.
Okay? But there's a probability, reasonably high, that as time goes on, they'll hear more and more, and they'll go, "Oh, maybe there's a problem. Oh, there is a problem."
Yes.
Now, industry also pretends, they have exposure limits that are insanely ridiculous.
Yes.
They were written by the telecom, by various corporations that were involved with looking at this, so that they would be able to put these products to the marketplace. Besides the fact that they're ridiculously high, insanely high, the assumption that they make, which is a fundamental lie, and I don't use that word lightly, that there are no adverse effects other than heating. So all they're looking for is heating. They also use average exposures. And that's in all toxicology, you don't use averages. And there's a way I have of explaining that. If I took 1 aspirin a day for a month, and you took 30 aspirin on one day and none for the rest of the month, our averages of 1 aspirin a day would be the same.
Yeah.
It's just insane that and it's deliberate. They are very, very aware, and they will eventually give way. By the way, they cannot get health liability insurance from insurance companies.
Yes. So
they have to self-insure. Well, the amount of money they set aside for the self-insurance is low enough that in the case of like asbestos, what happened once it became clear it was caused mesothelioma, all those companies went bankrupt.
Yes.
And so other than the assets going to help people to some extent, the stockholders and the victims were screwed. Yeah. To use that technical word.
To use a technical term.
Yes.
Yeah. So, in terms of the general population, we're principally talking about ignorance, it would seem. And as you say there, a lot of people are basing their decisions on hearsay rather than actual studies. But you've read the studies, you've created the studies. So, because we've got this, we've got the World Health Organization, which said in 2011 that cell phones were possibly carcinogenic. So that's obviously just completely wrong.
Today, if IARC was to meet, and we're working hard to push them to do that, IARC's the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization. It would be declared a Group 1 human carcinogen from the evidence. It's overwhelming. But they're under a lot of pressure not to hold such a meeting.
Yes. Financial pressure.
Oh, to give you just one aspect of how devious the industry is, there's an organization within the World Health Organization called the International EMF Project, founded by a guy named Michael Rappacelli,
Yes.
who's notorious. But anyway, without going into that. So they will put out press releases, never saying it's from the International EMF Project, but from the World Health Organization. They're a mole inside the World Health Organization, as was tobacco previously, and probably others that I don't know about. But industry is very capable of placing moles, if you will. And mole, I mean in the sense of secrecy, hidden people that act as spies.
Yeah. And because this is the second time I've spoken to you, and I know that you're sort of a fairly level-headed kind of person and mild kind of person. So you're putting this in, we could use a lot stronger words here than you're using. You're putting this in a very polite way. Let's put it like that. If you were to, if somebody, if you said to somebody, look, or somebody asks you, or you was having a conversation about cell phones and cancer, and you wanted to cite a study, you wanted to give them like that piece of, if you wanted to actually go into this, have this conversation with somebody, and you wanted to cite a piece of research that would make them change their minds, what would you say to them?
That's a good question, and I'm just thinking about. There's so many studies that are really alarming. I would probably point them to a Leonard Hardell and team study that had several thousand people in it, and it was also the first study that looked at the risk of brain cancer in this case from different phone types. So you have the first generation, which is no longer in use, analog phones. You have the second generation, which is CDMA or GSM modulation, and you have the third generation, which is UMTS modulation. Now, all that means is those are just terms. The modulation is extremely complex. It gets ever more complex.
Yes.
So I'm reading this paper from the Hardell team, and at the front end of it, it says that the average radiated power for the third generation phones is tens of microwatts, and the average radiated power of the second generation was tens of milliwatts, 1,000 times higher. And so the analog phone just radiated 2 watts nonstop, and they're no longer in use. So when I see the risks, they're actually higher for 1,000 than either the analog phone or the second generation phone, even though the power is 1,000 times lower. Mm-hmm. Now, I've seen many studies that showed that your risk is associated with the power. Again, the Hardell team many years ago published rural users versus urban users and found the rural users had higher risk. And that's because the phones are further from the cell tower, so they have to transmit more power. What Igor Belayev reported, and that's a citation, there's 3 of his papers that are cited in the paper, is that for whatever combination of reasons, the UMTS modulation inhibits DNA repair genes. So there's a mechanism there. Yes. That is explains why that's true. Now, in that context, even a UMTS phone, the further you are from a cell tower, the more power it radiates, you will find even higher risk. But an analog phone has 100,000 times more power than we also call this third generation is smartphones,
Yes.
and the second generation is dumb phones.
Yes.
Colloquially, and it's still the higher risk is the smartphone. Now, the fourth generation is called LTE, and I think it's a cosmic joke. It means long-term evolution, as if though anything. But it takes many years, because between the time that it's first introduced to the marketplace and before you can do an epidemiological study, because there is latency time. How long does it take to create a brain tumor?
Yes.
Typically, a minimum time is 10 years. And from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombing, it was 40 years before a brain tumor showed up.
Yes.
So one of the longest latency times of any cancer. So the very fact it's showing up at 10 years, it already says, whoa, what are you going to see at 40 years? The other thing that I think is very important, particularly with parents, children absorb double the radiation to their brain that an adult does. Yeah. And their bone marrow is 10 times more absorption than adults.
Yeah.
So
anecdotally, let's come on to children in a moment, if we can.
Sure.
I'm just listening to what you're saying there about the power as the technologies evolve. There's less power being emitted by these phones, and yet the dangers are increasing. So why is that?
Well, I have a hypothesis, which is, some people call it the wag, a wild ass guess, but in any case, when you modulate something, what you get is a series of discrete frequencies. Now, UMTS has like 40,000 discrete frequencies. And when you add them all back up again, you get the same wave shape. And my hypothesis is that you'll have resonances. Now, resonance is amplification.
Yes.
So between a biological element, whether it's DNA or a protein or whatever, and one or more of those frequencies. And of course, with each new technology, it gets ever more complex in terms of the modulation, which means also these discrete frequencies increase dramatically.
So it's the nature of the signal, perhaps more than the power, which is really the problem.
To a first approximation, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet in terms of the dangers, we seem to be talking about power and energy, don't we? And so we're off target.
Yes.
We're talking about the thermal effects. That's what the industry's talking about.
Well, the thermal effect is ridiculous.
Yeah, the same.
I mean, literally, all of the science showing this, there's no measurable temperature change. None.
So they're going, there's no thermal effects, therefore it's safe. But we know there's no thermal effects. It's not the thermal effects that the science is talking about.
Again, I use the word lie, and I don't use that lightly. And I recognize that the industry has enough power to take me to court. So when I say something like that, I'm very careful how I phrase words, but that is a lie. There are biological effects that have nothing to do with heating. And in fact, all of the health effects that have been found in humans have nothing to do with heating.
Yes. So the big question in many people's minds, if they do have a question about their cell phone and what it might be doing to them, the big question is usually cancer, because that's the big question of our times, isn't it? Because we've all got people that we've lost through cancer. And so my question is that really what we should be looking at? Because there's more than cancer going on here, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is
Well,
this really? Yeah.
electrohypersensitivity, or EHS, is a very common problem. And I think of it as a kind of allergy. Like if some kids, if you eat peanuts, you can have a terrible effect.
Yeah.
Okay, they're allergic to it. Well, so these people are allergic to electromagnetic fields at very low levels.
Yes.
Depending on the people, that could be so low that it's almost unimaginable, and it's well documented.
Yes.
There's also addiction, which 60 Minutes is a regular TV show here in the United States that looks at various problems, and they did one episode showing that by a conscious intent, when the design is being conceived, they want them to be addictive. They're designed to be addictive. And of course, they are addictive. Like if somebody's really using their cell phones and you're having a good conversation like we are now, and the phone rings, they'll say, just a minute, and 2 or 3 or 4 minutes later, they come back and talk to you again. Very rude, very disruptive, but they can't not take the call. Even if the call is only some robocall.
Yes. Yes. And there are biological mechanisms at play here too, are there not? In terms of how this frequency, this microwave frequency, this radio frequency radiation that we call it, that cell phones are emitting, how that is impacting the brain, different neurotransmitters, different hormones.
Absolutely. I mean, without a doubt. And I think addiction is also what's happening is your phone rings, a little dopamine comes in, surge of that, which is the same thing that happens when you take heroin or other addictive drugs, so that you feel good. And there's no argument. I mean, I've heard people again and again just say, I'm addicted. And it's now essentially in the media, addiction problem.
Yeah.
One of the, I don't think that mobile phones, if you will, cell phones, are going to go away.
No.
But they can become used far, far, far less.
Yes.
And used intelligently, like I described before.
Right. So
first and foremost, the industry has to reduce the radiated power.
Yes.
But even then, there's still a problem.
Yes.
So fiber optics has bandwidth that is astronomically high. It doesn't radiate at all. It's light. I mean, light radiates, but it's in the fiber optic, whatever. So if you really want a high bandwidth, you would go to places that have that non-radiating connection to get that information. That will drop, and the usage a lot. Today, people, strange to me, will download an hour and a half, 2-hour film and watch it on their little teeny screen. It's unbelievably ridiculous. I mean, you could have the same thing happening on a very nice screen with fiber optics. Now, South Korea has had fiber optics in every home, office, factory, whatever, for decades. In the United States, it's hardly ever involved, though what they're doing, there's a technology called 5G, the 5th generation.
Correct. Not
yet actually in use, which is being promulgated throughout the world, that will need fiber optics to operate, but does not bring it into the home. And in fact, I see the 5G process as an end run around blocking the fiber optic companies from being able to do the installation. Okay. You know, the cliche with landline phones, you know, back in the 20s or 30s or whenever they were still being installed, was the last 2 miles is the most expensive, because you had a switching operation that took your phone line and ran it to your house. So that was expensive. The same thing with the fiber optics, except it's running down the middle of the street now in most places, at least most urban advanced countries. All that has to happen is you bring that in that short distance, which is a lot less than 2 miles, maybe 200 feet at max. So that's something that can be done. So the whole thing, this idea that we have to always be connected. I mean, I'm not paranoid about a cell phone. If you had a phone and I needed to make a call, I would say, can I borrow your phone? You'd say yes. I would hold it to my ear, which is not the best thing to do. I'm going to do it for a couple-minute call. That's all. I don't want to have a cell phone because I don't want to be always available.
Yes.
I mean, I sit here in my office. I have a phone right over here, and the phone rings. At least I can see who's calling, and mostly it's robocalls anyways. Just yes.
Yes.
And particularly now that we're about to have our what we call primary elections, there's lots and lots of calls coming in, and I just ignore those completely. I don't even pick them up. But
I'm totally with you on that, and I don't, by the way, own a phone either, a cell phone, and it's just this feeling of freedom when I go out. And
yes,
my wife has one, and it annoys the hell out of me when we go out for a walk and she's got the thing. I ask her to switch it off. I don't want, and I ask her to switch it off for various reasons. There's the MFs that we have. For her, more than for me now, because it's, you know, if it's in her back pocket or something, it's obviously not good. But she wants to be in contact with the kids, and, you know. But it's just this intrusion, and you know, the EMF question aside, and it's just these things they're like gangrene in our lives. But I want to get on to talking about solutions. So we touched on it a moment ago. So yeah, if you could share, please, your tips for cell phone radiation protection. So what can we do to safeguard our health?
Well, in the immediate time frame, the first thing is just keep it at some distance from you.
Right.
Now, women have purses, so they can put the phone in the purse. Men need men's purses, right? You need to keep it physically away from you. Now, what men do is they put it in their front trouser pocket, okay? Major sperm damage.
Yes.
Now, we have here, and I think around in the industrialized world, this would be the case too. There's a fertility problem.
Yes.
And it's pretty clear. The sperm data research is the widest and the deepest of all the literature, because you have human studies, you have animal studies, and you have cellular studies that all point at major problems. So the sperm is damaged substantially. Its motility and the sperm count goes way down. As a result, you have this sort of infertile fertilization where people have to spend a lot of money just to have a child. In addition, you have DNA damage to the sperm. Now, the damaged sperm will have a hard time getting to the woman's egg, the ovum, but some do. So now you have gene differences that neither parent had. And autism is associated with de novo, which means neither parent has a particular gene, which then the autistic kid, if they have children themselves, will pass on that gene to the next generation. it's not absolutely confirmed that this is the reason for the autism epidemic, but the autism epidemic is exponentially increasing.
Yeah.
In epidemiology, if something is exponentially increasing, you have to look for an exponentially increasing exposure. Now, nobody's done a study with cell phone use and autism, but I'll take that. You know, that to me is certainly circumstantial evidence that it's what's going on.
Yes.
So the other way people keep their phones is they put them in their hip pocket. Colon rectal cancer in younger age groups is gone way up. You know, statistically significantly is the vocabulary in science. And I've read those papers, and the authors are clueless. They only say there's something going on, but they don't associate it with cell phones in their hip pockets. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but that's certainly a possible cause of that. There's something causing it. Right? So you are, and you have new cancers all the time being identified. I mean, thyroid cancer, skin cancer. There's a big salivary gland in our cheek called the parotid gland that is extremely rare. And in Israel, they had an enormous increase in parotid gland cancers. 20% were in children. Now, this is an old age cancer, typically. And the Israeli Dental Association put out a warning. So one has to, I mean, I would, if I was, I'm a parent, but long, you know, they're middle age at this point or beyond. But if I was a parent today with young kids, I would not allow cell phone use.
So
until at least their teenage years, and that's only because of peer pressure.
Right. So so if I can just, I want to get onto the kids in a sec, but so in terms, if you could just clarify what you said about this distance and why that's important. So distance is your friend, you said, but if you could just explain how that works, inverse square law, you know.
Okay, so this distance here is about 100 times further away than holding it to your ear.
Right.
100 squared. Yeah, I stretch my index and thumb out.
Right.
Right.
So if you put it that distance away,
it's a 10,000-fold reduction.
A 10,000.
100 squared is 10,000.
Because it's 100 squared, it's 10,000.
Now,
10,000-fold reduction.
Yeah, I'll use my calculator, but it's sort of the same profile. If I was to put this in my pocket and the antennas are on the back, you get that big a distance. Okay? If I do it the other way around, it's immediately against my chest. Okay? So any distance is better. Any distance. Obviously, if you went twice as far as you think is just okay, you get 4 times better reduction.
Yes.
And 3 times, 9 times, etc.
Yes.
Right?
So we can say distance is not only your friend, distance is your best friend, and your very best friend in terms of these exposures. And really, pretty much everything that we can do derives from that. This notion that distance is your friend, because if you're using it on speakerphone, it's because distance is your friend. If you're using like a headset, then again, distance is your friend.
Wired, not Bluetooth.
Right. Exactly. So we've got different kinds of headsets, and we don't want to be using the wired one because the wire can act as an antenna.
Yes, but if you think about the cross-sectional area of those wires, You got all this energy going out. Only it will couple in some energy, but it is very low. Certainly low compared to holding it up to your ear. You can buy, if you're really concerned about it, there's still air tubes.
Yes.
Which are plastic tubes that carry the sound that you can buy. They're commercially available.
Yes.
Used to be how you listen to things on airplanes.
Yes.
I'm dating myself.
So everything really derives from this notion of distance is your friend, your best friend, and that goes for text, don't talk. Also, is a good recommendation.
It goes for what?
Text, don't talk.
Yeah, true. And of course, that's very commonly done now too.
Yes.
In fact, I'm amazed at people that with their finger on and they're very accurate at how good people get at being able to text.
So we're going to get in the Guinness Book of Records soon, I'm sure. But
yeah, we'll have a contest.
Yeah.
Who can write 1,000 words without a spelling mistake faster than anybody else?
So really, so that is the number one thing to understand there is this distance is your friend, your best friend. And if you apply that, then think about any way that you can use a cell phone and anything you can buy to use a cell phone. Then if it's really, it derives from that principle most of the time. I mean, even the sleep.
When you say most of the time,
most
of the time, when you're not using the cell phone, where is it? Because again, if it's against your body, it's not friendly.
Yeah.
You have to keep it physically away from you.
Okay. Just a word about the sleeves then, because the sleeves and the sleeves, isn't there? You know, when I say sleeves, I mean these device cases, cell phone cases, because there's good and there's bad. Can you address that question?
It's if you have to put, as I illustrated before, the cell phone in your pocket, you put it with the display towards your body so you get that little extra distance. But I don't think you should ever put it in your pocket, period. I don't know. That's as much as I need to say.
Okay.
If there is a thicker phone, that's better. But of course, they want to make them as thin as they can.
Okay. So what I was thinking of is because there's certain cell phone cases which are sold which redirect the signal, and there's others which kind of blanket out, which like just solid shields. And the danger, as I see it, with the solid shield is if it's like a basic thing and you're actually trying to get a signal, then it's actually making it worse than these more sophisticated forms of shielding, which are redirecting, which the
Pong is a manufacturer that makes a little case that you can put your phone into. That is well done. That is what it does is it redirects the signal away from you.
Yes.
However, the reduction is tiny compared to keeping it any. I mean, if you just move it a tad further away, and it's far, far less.
Yes.
It's like the amount of reduction is low. There's also these little things that people buy that are frauds. Yes. Little things that you put it on your phone and you're protected. Now, what this says is that people are concerned about the danger.
Yes.
They recognize there's a danger. Those, I don't know what they cost, but they cost a pretty penny.
So,
and they're frauds. They don't do anything.
Yeah.
They make you feel better.
Yeah.
You feel safer.
I like a man who doesn't mince his words, liars and frauds. So
well, I use these words carefully.
I know.
I could go on with what I really think, but I won't do that.
So you've been chomping at the bit to talk about this, so and I want you to talk about this because this is, in my mind, the most important thing, and this is why I started talking about it online. The kids, our kids.
Yes.
Because I'm a father, you're a father, and we see parents giving cell phones to kids, buying cell phones for kids, for small kids. So let me just put the question to you, which people need to know. So, I ask you the question, how dangerous is that?
It's dangerous, very dangerous. First off, because children are going to be, even just the length of time they'll be exposed is, now what you find is, well, I'm stumbling around with so many ideas here. I'll take it on one at a time. Kids, preteens to teens, have their cell phone in their room at night. Somebody texts them, so the parents don't hear a ring at all. Okay, because they have it on vibrate mode. They wake up. They text back. They go back to sleep. Children need their sleep. They need more sleep than adults, obviously. Never mind the fact that that's a horrible thing, even from a health hazard. It's also a sleep hazard. I don't think that parents should allow cell phones in the bedroom at night, period. Also, when a cell phone is charging, it shouldn't be anywhere close to you. People will have the charger right next to the bed, like adults. Well, right now, even children, I guess, right next to their head, on a nightstand next to their head.
So when he's charging, just to answer that one, what's what we're talking about here? Magnetic field?
Again, well, it's always electromagnetic fields. Okay, yeah. The vocabulary began as the magnetic fields were really a hazard because that was what was first noticed. Now, with electricity, but yes, the magnetic fields are high. Electric cars are another whole issue, all of which could be designed if the electric current flowing to and from the electric car's motor the wires are close together, so that plus or minus 1 equals 0, the fields could be reduced dramatically. You need to keep things in proximity as a design project, which again, engineers, and I can speak as one, are completely ignorant about. They know how to manipulate electronics. They know how to make things work very well. I mean, I think engineering is a very important trade, if you will, that we all can profit from. But the ignorance of dangers is profound.
So there are dangers. Children are more vulnerable. Why?
Well, essentially, children have more water in their brain and in their tissues and stuff, and the water absorbs the radiation very, very, very well. Wi-Fi, by the way, is literally at the resonance of water. It's the same frequency that microwave use. And so it absorbs virtually 100%. Now, at other frequencies, it's very high absorption, but some of it's reflected off because it's not an exact match. What you also have is incredible amounts of devices for infants, even. For example, you have an app that you can buy for your phone that you put the phone underneath the sleeping infant, and if it moves or makes a sound, it plays mama's soothing voice. Now that's sick. That's truly sick. Okay, but it makes the parents feel good that they don't have to be always going in to see their kid. They have literally toilet training things where the child's learning how to, pee and defecate, and there's a little tablet there in front of them that they can play games on and stuff. I can imagine that you probably would have a hard time getting them to do their business as they should as they get older, because they love to sit there and watch and play with the games while they do their business. You have kids will take a phone very young and just put them in their mouth and be mouthing them. If you had little babies, they use their mouth a lot. All of that is beyond dangerous. The applications that are out there that are ever more inventive, crazy things. We live in a society where there is no pre-market testing for safety.
No.
It's just put it out there, and then if there's a big problem, you'll have a recall.
So children are more vulnerable because of the water content, you say, and the immune system also which is not as developed as adults. Skull size is smaller, so we've got less. A
bigger proportion of your brain is getting irradiated,
right,
than in adults.
Right.
But it's also more absorbent.
More absorbent.
Yeah. Then there's also the fetus.
Yes.
I remember many years ago when the iPad first came out in San Francisco, gigantic billboard, no words. A pregnant woman with a very big smile on her face had propped the iPad up against her swollen abdomen and was having a great time. What a joy to have an iPad. Horrible. I mean, the fetus of all, what's happening? We begin as a single cell, which then explodes. Unbelievable. I've never was involved with biology until now, but it is amazing, the whole process of, let's just say you get a DNA damage in the zygote, which is the fertilized egg. That will then spread across all the cell types that are going to be generated. Okay? So that's at the earliest stage, but the earlier it is, the worse it is because of the rate of cell division. Where you're really forming a human being from a single cell. So the fetus is by far the most vulnerable period of all. And then the younger the child, still more vulnerable, and as they get older, in fact, by the time you reach my age, you're not necessarily vulnerable to hardly anything except death itself, which is inevitable.
You've read the research, you've participated in the creation of quite a bit of this research. Children absorb high doses of radio frequency electromagnetic radiation, 2015 study. Another study, why children absorb more microwave radiation than adults. So can we give a number so people are listening, parents that are listening, what's the advice? So no cell phones to children, but what's the cutoff point? Is there a cutoff point?
Well, parents have a difficult job because they want to please their child and they want to help their child. So the kid wants to use the phone, and you have to say no. And again, like I said earlier, in today's culture, once you're a teenager, in fact, what's happening is your brain's also reorganizing itself so that pretty soon your parents don't know anything and you know everything. The nature of a teenager.
Yeah.
Okay. And that peer pressure is enormous. So you in my mind, if I was a parent today and the kids, every other kid's got I would wait till, say, 13 is kind of an arbitrary age, but it's teenager. Okay. And I would say, okay, you can have it. I would then still have some rules. Okay. Among them is the amount of time you can be on the phone. And that's all you got to do is look at a billing record to find out how much that it is. And you basically have penalties. Okay. You can't use it more than X hours or X minutes or however you want to think about it. And if you do, then you're going to not have access to use it for a week. Or it's up to a parent how to do that.
Yeah.
That's not a case for the society to write those laws.
So what age can they use these phones? What's your recommendation?
Well, I think that, and I'm talking about a practical thing. There's no age that you can use it that be safe. You can be taught to use it. Of course, they don't listen either. That's the part of teenagers thing. It's, oh, you don't know anything, Mom or Dad. Yeah, you smile. We've all been there. Anyone that's got kids that have grown up. You've gone through this, and then and then later on they turn out okay. But at first they think you're ridiculous and da 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 da. What happens too? The brain is rewiring itself from childhood and begins in teenage years to adulthood. And that development of the brain continues into the low 20s, 24, 25, 26, something like that. Finally, all of that wiring has been redone to be, to have you behave logically as an adult rather than logically as a teenager.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but the role of parents is no matter what happens in the future, and I hope in the future we have cell phones that radiate 1,000 times less power than they do today.
Yeah.
That they are used far less frequently than they are now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But still, they're not going to go away.
They're not going to go away.
And parents have to, which they also need to do with themselves, is to really understand that this is not a toy.
So I'd like to just change subjects to address something else, just a few minutes if we can, because we're running out of time.
Sure.
I want to talk about dirty electricity, if we can.
Okay.
That was completely changing the subject, but it's still a form of EMF pollution, which is typically found on household wiring. So, and I know you've done research on this with Dr. Samuel Millam,
Right.
and I know it's also research done in a school, in fact. And so it's this electropollution which is on the house wiring. Can you speak to that? What this dirty electricity is and what the dangers are?
Right. So dirty electricity is a result of interrupting the current flow of the electrical wiring. So you have and if the wiring is done correctly in houses, the hot and neutral are close together, so they really don't radiate. They just can't cancel each other out. I mean, there's a lot of wiring mistakes that happen in housing, which causes what's called a net current problem. If the wires are close together, it's +1 plus or minus 1. The net is 0. If you measure anything other than that, because you have a third wire called ground. And the ground connection should only be done out at where the electricity enters the house, nowhere else, and then throughout the house anyway. So there's that. But now everything uses what's called a switching process to get the voltages that they want. It used to be, you know, like in the 60s, if you bought a hi-fi amplifier, it weighed like 40 pounds because you had to have these big transformers and stuff. So but instead of just transforming it down to a different voltage, you chop the circuit, meaning that you you just break it up. And that allows you to change the voltage very, you know, it's far less actually power consumptive too. It uses far less power to use it. Thing. So what happens is if you have a current flowing like this, whenever you have that thing, you get a spike that dies in an oscillatory manner. If you use, like, say, light dimmer switches, that could be 20,000, 40,000 times a second that it's going, you know, like, so, you know, 60 cycles or 50 cycles in Europe is, you know, a very, you know, 1/60th or 1/50th of a second kind of time. Well, if it's happening 20,000 times a second, then you've got, it just overlaps completely. It's always, and if you looked at it with an oscilloscope, you get this classic sine wave, but you get fuzz on top of the sine wave. And the frequencies are also, the coupling is proportional to the frequency, at least across the range that this would be happening. It is trivial to filter that out so that it doesn't go back on your electrical wiring. I know of no devices that do that, but it's absolutely adds a few percent at most to the cost of a product to put in a filter that keeps it inside, in the case of the light dimmer switch example, but it's everything. Okay, so, the power supply of my computer, it's you name it. If it's electronic, there's a switching power supply is what we call it in the trade.
Okay. So that is a really good explanation of how this phenomenon occurs. Dirty electricity. What about the dangers? So I referred to this study that you did.
Well, okay, so it's the same kind of dangers. I mean, you have well documented risks for brain cancer, leukemia, you know, it's gone off you know, when I first started looking at this stuff, there was a lot of papers being published, which was beginning in 1995. And it was a real problem, and it was declared a probable carcinogen 10 years before radio frequency radiation. But it's all electromagnetic. It's really, the distinctions are minor. Solar power, great, saves the planet in many ways. But they too, you got a small voltage, you got to chop it up so that you can raise it to 50s. The 220 volt in Europe and the 120 volt here in the United States, whatever. You got to raise it to that voltage. And so this could be filtered out. You could, if you have a pure frequency, no other. I mean, when you look at something with a fuzz on it, there's a multiplicity of frequencies.
So you're saying
electricity could be put out as a pure wave, and it is anything but. And by the way, the term "dirty electricity" came from the electrical utilities. That was their vocabulary.
Yeah. And your vocabulary is?
Dirty electricity.
I thought he was going to give me another term. But so I am actually interviewing Dave Stetzer on this in great detail, but I just wanted to get your view on the solution, just very quickly, what is the solution for you for dirty electricity? What should people do?
The solution is that all electronic devices need to have these filters built in, and you can only do that with regulation. Though I can imagine, a good marketeer, if say there wasn't the regulation, because there's so little cost, except this is just pure ignorance today, that you say for a little extra you can have one that's really safe versus. So I have a product that's I have two products. There's the low cost one, and there's one, and they'll mark it up so that the margin on that extra thing can be 100 times more for them, because it doesn't make any difference to, there's people that want the safer product. But what you really have to have is legislation. That you cannot have anything that connects to the electrical wiring that causes to be distributed to you. Another thing, and I talked about this idea of a wiring error where you have a net current problem, which is going out on the ground. Well, so you can be living in a neighborhood and your house is clean from the net current problem, but the current's going to flow back to the substation at the lowest possible resistance. Piping is, in your own home, can be one of the pathways it will take. Probably will take. So you can have substantial net current problems in your house, even if your wiring is correct.
Yes.
Which really is not coming in through the wires, it's coming in through the piping. And so those magnetic fields are also, well, I use the old vocabulary. Those electromagnetic radiation is always a problem. It's more efficient at coupling at higher frequencies, but it's still a problem.
Okay, well, you've shared a lot with us today. We've moved around a little bit, but is there anything that any last comments you'd like to share with the viewers here?
I think the public has to really demand that something happens. In my own experience, beginning in 1995, I hadn't paid attention before. Public health never acts, no matter the evidence, until the public itself is demanding action. So we, as the public, need to demand that these problems be resolved. Public health agencies are governmental agencies. Governmental agencies are very beholden to corporate world. And it doesn't matter what the problem is. It isn't going to get fixed without the public. You can have all the evidence the world has to offer. They have to scream bloody murder. We
the people.
We the people.
Okay. And for people who want to find out more about your research, where should they go?
The Environmental Health Trust is a very good source, and they will bring you to other links as well. But you can. I think it's ehtrust.org. So www.ehtrust.org. But you can just Google the Environmental Health Trust, and it'll pop up.
Okay. Well, Lloyd Morgan, thanks so much for being part of the EMF Health Summit 2018. It's been fascinating catching up with you today on this subject. Thank you.
Well, Lloyd Burrell, or Lloyd from Lloyd, thank you too.
And for all of you who've joined us today, thanks for being part of this movement. Stay tuned for our next session. My name is Lloyd Burrell. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.